So what we know is that in June, Malaysia had a really thumping win over their regional rivals, Vietnam. There was a 4-0 win, which is quite an unusual achievement for the Malaysian national team. And FIFA received a complaint that five of the players on the field that night had actually just been given Malaysian passports the very week before. And in the preceding months, two others had also been granted Malaysian citizenship. Now, FIFA did a very thorough investigation, released a 63-page report, which makes for pretty incredible reading. They accuse the Football Association of Malaysia of doctoring birth certificates that show that these men's grandparents were born in Malaysia, when in fact FIFA found they were born in their countries of origin, which, as you mentioned, were Spain, Argentina, Brazil, and the Netherlands. Yeah, they've basically slapped a 12-month suspension on the players. The association has been made to pay a large fine, and it's possible that the consequences for Malaysian football won't end there.
Yeah, so were the players involved aware that they were not legally allowed to represent Malaysia?
Look, that remains unclear, but it's in terms of FIFA's perspective, FIFA's pretty damning of those players. Again, it's banned them from any football related activities for 12 months, and it said in its report that these men used the word illegally. Were aware and they benefited from this scheme. So regardless of who, I guess, orchestrated it and organized these falsified documents, it's FIFA was really most damning of the players themselves, who it said, would benefit from being able to play on the international stage and all of the sort of, I guess, financial and football benefits that accrue for these players from that. Nevertheless, the Football Association has suspended its Secretary General, but given it's kind of maintaining its innocence, it says this was all an administrative error. FIFA itself has said that it just sees that as a PR stunt.
Yes, and on the players themselves, I mean, the big question is, why would these players have done so knowing, what the punishments would be? Because we do see a lot of countries across, especially Southeast Asia, that do naturalize citizens from other countries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not unusual practice to naturalize players from, a country of diaspora. And of course, Australia's got lots of players from diverse backgrounds, although granted, they usually have grown up here. Indonesia, next to Malaysia, of course, uses many players that have grown up in the Netherlands but have Dutch lineage. But then that connection's pretty obvious because, of course, Indonesia was once colonized by the Netherlands. The connection between Malaysia and countries like Argentina and Brazil is much less obvious. So I think there is a real sense from people I spoke with that people are just kind of dumbfounded that the association and the players thought that they could get away with this in 2025, when it's not really hard to track down people's identities or documentation. Got ancestry.com. Why they thought that they could get away with it, it's sort of beggars belief.
Yes, now these players were involved in Malaysia's successful campaign to qualify for the Asian Cup. It hasn't done so for quite some time. So do we know if Malaysia will still be involved, and would there be more punishments meted out by FIFA beyond the fine that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, sorry, I should probably correct you. I'm not sure that they've actually qualified yet, but it was looking very good for them.
Yes.
But my understanding is that, had this not occurred, they would have likely qualified. However, it's likely, given FIFA's findings, that they will lose the points for at least the victories that they had, which is at least two wins they had with these guys on the book. So without those extra points, then they won't probably qualify for the Asian Cup. Apologies if that's not the latest up-to-date information, but that's my understanding. In terms of the longer-term consequences, however, I think there is a real sense that, obviously Malaysians want their team to do well, but there's a sense that this is not the way to do that. And also there's a sense of kind of embarrassment that this has done terrible reputational damage to the Malaysian Football Association, and that, there's a sense like countries like Vietnam, I've noticed the Vietnamese media is following this story very closely, and there's a sense that regional neighbors are sort of laughing at Malaysia as cheaters. And so I think the consequences, even beyond that, though, is that FIFA have also reported this as a criminal matter in the five countries, Malaysia and the four European and Latin American countries you mentioned, where, of course, fraud is a crime. So we may well see this become a criminal matter. But at the very least, of course, it's very, very damaging for the Malaysian Football Association and indeed for these individual players. And I think it will take some time, perhaps decades, for this, Malaysia to really bounce back from what is a terrible scandal.
Yes, and of course, these 7 players who have been suspended were given, granted a citizenship that this or were naturalized. There is also a large number of stateless residents in Malaysia. Has that been brought to light in the light of this scandal in the Malaysian public?
Yes, absolutely. So not only, of course, are people angry about, I guess, the perceived, mismanagement, fraud, corruption, whatever you want to call it, but on top of that, I guess, is the perceived double standards around citizenship. So it's actually very difficult to become a Malaysian citizen generally. There's not that many paths. And there is a very large stateless population in Malaysia, including at least around 10,000 people who were brought to Malaysia during the colonial period from primarily the Indian subcontinent, who have lived in the country for generations. They speak Malay. They're, for all intents and purposes, Malaysian, but they're not granted citizenship and they're denied that right. Meanwhile, people who have no connection to Malaysia whatsoever, as it seems, are able to get passports quite quickly if they can kick a ball well. So I think there is a lot of anger in terms of, I guess, the human rights implications of this. There are other issues, for example, Malaysian women that have children outside of the country. It's a very difficult process for them for their own kids to become Malaysian citizens if they're not born within the country. So again, I think this perceived double standard on top of all of the other kind of murkiness and nastiness associated with this incident has really caused a national conversation that's much broader than just soccer.
Okay, yeah, it's quite the scandal that looks like it's going to develop further. Max Walden, thank you so much.
Thanks, Girish.